So this happened 3 weeks ago, and I still can't sleep properly. I keep telling myself I'm losing my mind, but honestly, part of me hopes that's what it is, because the alternative is so much worse. I got a call from the city about doing an assessment on this old school building. Blackwood Elementary had been sitting empty for 15 years, and some developer wanted to put a shopping center there. Simple job. Go in, check for hazards, document everything so the demolition crew could do their thing. Should have been routine. I've done hundreds of these assessments over the years, but the moment I pulled up to that place, something felt off. The building looked like something out of a nightmare. 2 stories of red brick covered in kudzu, windows either boarded up or broken, graffiti tags so faded you could barely make them out. Even the parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds. But it wasn't the decay that bothered me, it was the silence. I've been in plenty of abandoned buildings, and they're never really quiet. There's always something. Wind through broken windows, settling sounds, maybe some animals that have moved in. This place was dead silent, like the air itself was holding its breath. I unlocked the main entrance with the keys the city gave me and stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately. That musty, stale air you get in places that have been closed up too long, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. Something sweet and rotten, like flowers left in water too long. The hallways stretched out in both directions, lined with classroom doors that hung open. Most of the furniture was gone, but there were still traces everywhere. Bulletin boards with faded decorations, a few desks shoved into corners, even some kids' artwork still taped to the walls. I started documenting everything with my camera, making notes on my tablet. Standard procedure. But as I worked, I kept hearing things, faint sounds that seemed to come from below my feet. Voices maybe, or just the building settling in weird ways. In one of the classrooms, someone had left a drawing on the whiteboard. It was done in crayon, a simple house with a big yellow sun above it, the kind of thing a first grader might draw. The sun had this big smile on it, but looking at it made me feel uneasy for some reason. I took a photo and moved on to the next room. When I came back through that hallway 20 minutes later, I glanced at the drawing again. The sun wasn't smiling anymore. The mouth was just a straight line, like it was disappointed or angry. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the lighting was different, or I hadn't looked at it carefully the first time. But it bothered me enough that I took another photo. The second floor was worse. More water damage, holes in some of the ceilings, and that sweet, rotten smell was stronger up there. And the sounds were getting louder, definitely voices now, coming from somewhere below. They sounded like children reciting something, the way kids do when they're practicing their multiplication tables or saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I tried to convince myself it was just acoustics, maybe sound carrying from somewhere else. But we were pretty isolated out there, and what kids would be reciting lessons at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday? By the time I finished the second floor, every instinct I had was telling me to get out of there. But I still had the basement to check, and I've never left a job unfinished. I was about to discover just how big a mistake that would be. The basement access was behind the old cafeteria kitchen, a heavy metal door with basement stenciled on it in faded black letters. The moment I opened that door, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath actually misted in the sudden cold, and that rotten smell got so strong I had to cover my nose with my shirt. The staircase disappeared into complete darkness, and my flashlight beam barely seemed to penetrate it. The basement was huge, stretching under most of the building. Storage rooms, mechanical spaces, what looked like an old fallout shelter from the Cold War era. Everything was covered in dust and cobwebs, and there were these dark stains on the concrete floor that I didn't want to think too hard about, but it was the sounds that really got to me. Those voices were much clearer down there, and I could make out individual words now. Children reciting something in unison, their voices echoing through the corridors. And there were footsteps. Small ones, like kids running around just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I followed the sounds deeper into the basement, past rooms filled with moldy textbooks and broken furniture. The voices were getting louder, but here's the weird part. They weren't coming from this level. They were coming from below. That's when I found the second staircase. It was hidden behind what looked like a maintenance panel. But when I pried it open, there was another set of stairs, leading down into an even deeper darkness. These stairs were different, older, made of worn brick instead of concrete, and they were smooth, like they'd been polished by countless feet over the years. I should have stopped right there, should have closed that panel and gotten the hell out of that building. But those voices were so clear now, and I could hear what they were saying. They were reciting names and dates, like they were taking attendance. The staircase seemed to go on forever. My flashlight beam couldn't find the bottom, and the air got colder with each step. The voices stopped as I descended, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. Finally, I reached the bottom. I was in a long hallway lined with doors. Not modern doors, but heavy wooden ones with old-fashioned brass handles. And from under one of them, about halfway down the hall, I could see light flickering. Not electric light, but the warm, unsteady glow of candles. My hands were shaking as I approached that door. The handle was ice cold, so cold it actually burned my palm when I touched it. But I turned it anyway. The door opened onto something that shouldn't have existed. It was a classroom, but not like any classroom from this century. Everything looked like it was from the 1950s. Wooden desks arranged in perfect rows, a blackboard covered with lessons written in chalk, even an American flag hanging in the corner. But it was the occupants that made my blood freeze. There were children sitting at every desk. At least, they had been children once. They were small, wearing old-fashioned school clothes. The girls in simple dresses, the boys in short pants and button-up shirts. But their skin looked like old parchment, yellow and brittle, and their eyes reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. They sat perfectly still, hands folded on their desks, all of them staring at me with expressions of polite, patient attention. Some looked fresher than others, but they all had that same terrible stillness about them. At the front of the classroom stood a woman in a gray dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked almost normal at first glance, but when she turned to face me, I saw that half her face was gone. Just gone, revealing yellowed bone and empty shadow beneath. She spoke, and her voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. "You're late for class. Please take your seat." I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam sweeping across the room. That's when I saw him. A boy in the back row who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He was wearing a Pokemon t-shirt, the kind that was popular maybe 15 years ago. His mouth moved silently, and I could read his lips. "Help me," the teacher continued, and I could see now that her remaining eye was completely black, like a shark's. "We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for such a long time." That's when I noticed the empty desk at the very back of the room. It was adult-sized,
unlike all the others, and above it on the blackboard someone had written my name. Not just my first name, my full name, along with my address, details about my life that no one should have known. The children began to turn in their seats, all of them looking at me now with those terrible reflecting eyes. Their mouths opened in perfect unison, and they began to recite in voices like whispers from a grave. Marcus James Crawford, born October 15th, 1985. Lives alone at 247 Maple Street. No family nearby, no one to miss him. The boy in the Pokemon shirt looked directly at me and mouthed one word: run. I ran. I don't remember much about getting out of there. I know I dropped my flashlight somewhere in that hallway. No, I stumbled up those stairs in complete darkness, while behind me I could hear them following. Not running, just walking with that same patient, measured pace. Their voices echoed up from below, reciting the details of my life like some kind of twisted prayer. I made it to the main basement, then up to the ground floor, then out into the gray October morning. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, and I didn't stop driving until I was back in town, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel.
I called in sick for the rest of the week, told my boss I'd picked up some kind of flu bug. When I finally went back to work, I filed my report recommending immediate demolition due to structural instability and potential safety hazards. I didn't mention the basement beneath the basement. I didn't mention the classroom that couldn't exist. The demolition crew went in 2 weeks later. They found the main basement exactly as I documented it, full of old furniture and mechanical equipment. But when they broke through the concrete floor to check the foundation, they found something else, a network of tunnels and rooms that predated the school by decades. And in one of those rooms, they found remains. 37 children and one adult woman, all arranged at desks as if they were still in class. The bones were old, some dating back to the 1950s, others more recent. The newest belonged to a boy named Timothy Chen, who'd gone missing in 2008, just before the school closed for good. He'd been 10 years old when he disappeared. According to the missing person report, he'd been wearing a Pokemon t-shirt. The official investigation concluded that some kind of serial killer had used the hidden basement as his hunting ground over the course of several decades. The case was officially closed. The remains were given proper burials, and the shopping center was built right on schedule. But I know the truth. Those children weren't victims of some human monster. They were students in a class that never ended, taught by a teacher who refused to let them go. And they're still down there, somewhere beneath all that concrete and steel, waiting patiently for their next classmate to arrive. I quit that job the day after the demolition crew made their discovery, found office work instead. Something that keeps me far away from old buildings. But the nightmares won't stop. Almost every night I dream about that classroom. I dream about taking my seat at that adult-sized desk while the teacher writes my name on the blackboard and the children recite the details of my life in their hollow, patient voices. And sometimes, when I'm walking through the new shopping center that stands where Blackwood Elementary used to be, I swear I can hear them beneath my feet. The sound of children reciting their lessons, waiting for class to begin again. Timothy Chen's voice among them now, no longer asking for help, but reciting along with the rest. Last week I found a piece of chalk on my kitchen counter. I live alone, and I know I didn't put it there. When I picked it up, it was ice cold, just like that door handle had been. That night, I heard the sound of chalk on a blackboard coming from somewhere in my apartment.
When I looked out my window, I saw a small figure standing under the streetlight across from my building. It was wearing a school uniform from the 1950s, and it was holding what looked like a piece of paper. I think it had my address written on it. The basement beneath Blackwood Elementary is gone now, buried under tons of concrete and steel. But somewhere in the darkness below, I know the teacher is still standing at her blackboard, and the children are still sitting at their desks with their hands folded politely, waiting for their next lesson to begin. And I'm starting to think that lesson is going to be about me, because they know where I live now, and class is about to begin.